Hello, this is David D. Hilser. I am a critical thinker, dissident scientist, and if you are not science woke, then this is the place for you. There are literally thousands and thousands of scientists from around the world who have been working for decades outside the mainstream, who've identified problems, fixed those problems, and who are proposing new models and theories. You won't find anything like this on YouTube, so make sure you go down below and click on that subscribe button, the little bell next to it, and you'll be alerted to when our next video drops. Thank you so much for our new subscribers. I'm getting quite a number a day, and it's greatly appreciated. I hope you enjoy this channel because you're not going to find anything like it. And the thing about me is you got to think yourself. I'm only going to present you stuff you've got to decide yourself. That's what we're trying to get you science woke, meaning I'm going to show you things that you've never heard about, didn't know was going on. Yeah, big science is a big problem in reality, but I also want you to become a critical thinker and never to believe anything I say. Check it out for yourself. Read it. Let it roll around. Most of the other channels that you see are pushing a theory, pushing an idea, and they say they're right, they're super confident. And I said, look, we're lucky if we can put together two equations that will do anything useful for humankind. I am that kind of engineering attitude. And so stick around and thanks, and let other people know about this channel. Well, today we're going to talk about something that's probably the most prominent model out there, the most prominent modern model out there, and that is Aether. I have been threatening to talk about Aether for so long, and I'm finally doing it. I've put together notes for a long time, didn't like it, but I really came up with something that I think is really important. It's on one of these bullet points. I'm not going to tell you which one. Stay around because it's a real interesting journey that I'm going to take you on that not even those people who are dissidents may have this kind of view of Aether. So what is Aether? Light is a wave in the medium of ether. That's what ether is, modern ether. Light is to ether like ocean waves are to water, or sound waves are to air. So if you think of the air as being ether and sound waves being the waves, they would be the light. And so in this, even though there are an atmosphere here with oxygen and other gas, other atoms floating around here, and I breathe those in, and I'm talking and vibrating those, and you can hear them, they get into the system, etc., etc., etc. Well, there's also, you can see light here, and at a much smaller scale, there is a bunch of little particles they call ether, and they bounce together so that when light is generated, so something's going like this and generates, it makes a wave in that ether, and that ether, then it becomes light, and it comes in all directions, so that's what it is. Waves are transmitted through collisions, so that's how it works. So one particle hits another, hits another, hits another. So just like in a wave, the thing is, one water molecule hits another, and transmits that wave, even though the ether itself is not moving. That's a generalization, of course. We call this luminous ether. Why? Well, because ether is a gas. E-T-H-E-R is a gas, and ether is the light medium. We try to make those two different. So luminous ether, meaning light, luminous, is what you can we're talking about today. It is strictly a solution for light. And this is, if anything I can get across to you, is this: ether, the idea of ether, has really one purpose in the beginning, and that is to give a medium for light. That is, light isn't magical. Lights, they say, can't be a particle. It's got to be a wave. How can you have the wave-particle duality? That's why they say this is why ether exists. This is why people are so, light is so important, yet we know nothing about it. We have no physicality for it. So everybody outside the mainstream, 90% of the people, that's what they're doing. Yeah, it's got to be ether. But again, it's a solution only for light. But we'll talk about the ramifications of that later. And yes, I know the ethers out there are listening. Yeah, Dave, it also describes gravity. Well, it does when you fit it in there. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Majority of critical thinkers working outside the mainstream are etherists. I would say 90% of the people in our organization are etherists. The history. Well, luminous ether was suggested by Newton. In fact, you can read ether in the Wikipedia and read all about it. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it's that far back. In the late 1800s, there was a huge search for ether, trying to show that there is a medium. And Michelson and Morley experiments, what did they do? Well, they put a light table where they had light going one direction and then another direction, making interference. And they said, if we are in ether, if the Earth is traveling through ether, it's moving, and the ether is like the air here. So I'm moving this Earth model through the air, and the model is moving, but the air is staying still. So I can then detect that I'm moving through this ether because I have a speed in it. And if I'm going with the ether, if it's a wind and it's moving at a certain speed, it's going to change. The light wave will change. It's just like if I am moving along, if I'm in a boat and the waves are coming on shore and I'm moving in a boat along through those waves, you're going to see the waves faster if you're going against the waves, and they're going to look slower going away from them. That's the same idea. Same idea there for the Michelson-Morley. And guess what happened? They didn't find anything. I didn't even write that down, but I guess so many people know that. But basically they have what they call a negative result. They didn't find any change. So Einstein also squashed ether, saying it was not needed because he could derive the equations necessary for relativity, special relativity, without any kinds of ether, or he could do the Lorentz equation, so you didn't need to have anything to do with ether. And so Einstein comes along and says, don't need it. I'm not going to get into technical explanation too much. You can read about that yourself. Again, I'm not here to give a history lesson on each one of these because it'll go for long. I'm just trying to tell you about what ether is in today. But of course, in 1940, Karazani came along and showed Einstein's argument incorrect. In fact, the Lorentz equations that they say can be derived from special relativity, in fact, derive the wrong power. It should be it gives you 2/3 instead of a 1/3 or something like that. Do not quote me, but go and read autodynamics.org and you will find out about that. In fact, I have a link right up there where I talk about Karazani's work, and you'll know all about that. So this is, again, history according to people outside the mainstream, and Dave DeHill specifically. Okay, I mean, yeah, this is my channel, and this is the way I see the history. And yes, I see Karazani as probably the premier person to show Einstein's argument that ether, that it wasn't needed, and he could derive these equations that were needed, that ether would explain. Karazani showed that, in fact, Einstein's explanation was wrong. Going on? Well, ether versus the graviton. So remember what I said. If you remember anything from ether, it is it is a solution for light. It is not a solution for gravity. It's not a solution for anything else. It is, in fact, a solution for light. And when you have people who are working on gravity, they work on the graviton. And the graviton is a particle that is responsible for gravity. That's the idea. That's the theory. And of course, you actually read graviton and you can see it even on particle, the standard model, the word graviton. So it's really weird. You got photons, gravitons, but they got space-time, and they don't know. Mainstream, big science is all mixed up. But anyways, etherists try to fit gravity into their light model. Remember I said, no, I'm an etherist and I can explain gravity. Ether has the 100% intention of making a medium for light waves. If you then have an ether theory, you fall in love with that theory, you say, oh, I've solved the problem. And this is why gravity works, because ether will explain that. And we have numerous people who do that. Even people I admire greatly who do that, whether it's right or wrong, and it's not important. It's a model, because we're never going to be right or wrong. It's going to be better and worse. Graviton people don't try to do this. You don't really see graviton people saying, well, light is this in the graviton world, except for the DeHilster and DeHilster. I don't know who those guys are. Those guys are rebel rousers. So truly, graviton people don't do that, and there are graviton people who don't do that, all of them except for my father and I. My father found a way to do that in April of 2015, so it was pretty cool. Anyways, remember that. Yes, you're going to hear etherists say, no, it solves gravity. It solves gravity when they fit it in there and try to explain it via ether. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that the intention of ether has always been, to explain light. Okay, different at ether concepts. Well, you have entrained ether. Well, the reason people said maybe Michelson Morley didn't find themselves traveling in this sea of ether, or the ether was moving in one direction, it was another, and they couldn't find it because it's entrained, meaning it's sort of stuck to it. Imagine like it was like an atmosphere, and so when you go like that, yeah, there's movement. Let's just say the atmosphere is static. It's clinging here, and so when it's moving with it, the ether's moving with it. So therefore, when you measure in whatever direction, in whether it's in the summer, in the winter, whatever side of the sun you're on, and whatever direction you're going according to the galaxy, whatever it is, it won't matter because the ether is entrained. It is following you. It's right there. Then there's flowing ether that flows. That's very common to have. Yonel Danu, Ionel Danu, the Danu effect, which I call it. He said they're like stable structures and they're like donuts, and that magnetism is ether flow. I really believe that the Danu effect is right. I'm not sure I'm an etherist. Well, I'm not an etherist myself, but that is another way people look at it, that ether will flow, that there's waves through it, but it still will flow. Glenn Borkert, who is a great scientist with his book on the 10 Assumptions of Science, New Mechanics, Infinity is great. He also is an etherist, been working on his stuff. Vancouver ether, I call it, and I coined that myself. I coined it, but I didn't make it up. I didn't make that model up, and all of our models are made up in the end. But Duncan Shaw, he is from Canada, and he's a critical thinker, and he has ether coming that flows in to the Earth and also flows out. So it's a two-way street, and there's reasons for that, and that's the way he thinks it works. And of course, he's a cool critical thinker. He's a ex-Supreme Court justice, but a great thinker. And right now, he's a critical thinker of science to me. I don't care what his job was before. Subatomic ether, that's what I sort of named it. Sort of standing waves are what we call particles. And that's Jeff Yee's energy wave theory. Very interesting, where he's mixing the world of ether and waves and particles and saying particles, everything's a wave, in fact, in this medium. And so that's really cool. So these are different ether concepts used in different ways. They're not all pure, but they give you some idea of the variety. And of course, mainstream's objections, they just ignore modern day ether theory because it has been proven wrong. It's one of those things like, oh, well, we have proven Einstein correct, so we don't even argue against it. So why would we sit there and resuscitate a bad idea like ether? And because Einstein shows it's not needed. And anyways, that's the way they say it, so they don't even look at it. They just basically they'll tell us that, oh, you guys are lost. You're just behind. Objection from non-etherists who are critical of mainstream. That is, people who are not mainstream people, and those people are in fact even part of our group. And not part of our group, actually. They look at it and say the elasticity, that is the hardness of, you'd have to have a particle so hard that to transmit something at that speed would have to be immensely, it would be a million billion times harder than steel. And if you hit a hammer at the end of a steel beam or rod, it goes much faster than if you hit it in a wooden rod. That is the transmission speed. So the harder the material, the faster the collisions will transmit faster. And they said that's just an impossibility mechanically. In fact, we got one guy who is not an etherist who actually published in this year's proceedings and left because he said, I can't live with etherists because they're all wrong, because of exactly what that says. So again, I'm here just to report it. You've got to figure it out yourself. And that's the idea. Ether's real problems. Now, this is David Hilster looking at it this way, and other people, and not only myself, but people who are not etherists, what they say, well, you're inserting gravity into ether because they are basically light models. Absolutely. This is an absolute truth. And people will come and they're going to justify it. They're going to emotionally justify it. No, but I just didn't know. Laser light cannot be explained. How is it? Because if you have sound here, I can't direct the sound. I can sort of direct it a little bit in a direction, but it's spreading. But I can't direct sound just at you, and the guy next to you is not going to hear it because it goes in all the directions. And so laser light is really hard to explain if it can't be explained, perhaps. Dispersion or transverse waves. Dispersion, so you have waves are like this, and then you have waves are like this in the same medium. How does that happen? Again, sort of look it up. Borkert is a good example of trying to solve that transverse wave thing, and he says basically ether, then if it was shaped like galaxies, then we wouldn't have that problem. But I think if those galaxies would have to sort of line up. So what happens if you have them in a different direction? But again, I'm not saying anybody is wrong, or even ether is wrong. It's just I'm reporting it, and these are what we people who are not etherists do have problems, and this is one of the reasons I'm not an etherist. Some of these are the same reasons. So what we really have in the end today, in my opinion, is that we have an emotional attraction to ether. Why so? Why do we have 90% of our organization, our members? We have over 300 active members. We've had thousands of members throughout the years, if you add them all up. And we have thousands of people outside the mainstream. Most of those people think there's an ether. That's because they say there's light has to have something there. You can't just have this magical space-time with not any physicality. I applaud that. I think that's great. But light in our own scientific experience just acts like a wave in something. It's just, everything we look at, it just seems that way. It's easy to explain things in wavelengths and the equations we use, and the different colors are different wavelengths, and the idea, well, this has got to be a wave in something. It's just sees intuitive. Even I, David D. Hilster, constantly try to make ether theory work. I'm always thinking about that, and actually just recently in the last few months, that's been less true. But I spent a lot of time. I look at ether theories and all that, but I think there's just this intuitive feel that we have that we think it must be light. And of course, in the particle model, in our particle model, we have a different way. It's digital. And so but that's, to me, is why there's an emotional attraction to ether. It just seems intuitive, if it's right or wrong. So finally, alternatives to ether's light model. Really, there are two that I can really think of that try to give it physicality. Lattice models. Lattice model is, space is filled like a scaffolding everywhere, and so that light is like if you push on something, there's waves through it, and it doesn't matter what it is. If I do this and I slow it down, there'll be a wave through this. Anything that you hit on, there's going to be a wave. So a lattice model, meaning it's just a structure that we're all in. So imagine it's like a digital thing, and we're just little flip-ons and flip-offs in this lattice structure. That is a legitimate model that people are looking at. And of course, the particle model, but only the particle model right now, TPM being the particle model by D. Hilster and D. Hilster. My father actually solved that, not me. I just take a ride from it and steal it from him. No, there's a lot more to the particle model than just that. But regardless, particle model does now, and basically I should have said that differently, the graviton model can incorporate quite easily and quite simply waves into that model. So anyways, I hope that's really helped you a lot about what ether is. Go back to that first slide and remember it's a light medium. It's like, where you have waves in water, you have waves in air. That's what ether is. Light is the ether. It's transmitted through collisions. It's known as luminous ether in mainstream. If someone even asks a physics professor, it's AETHER. Some of our people spell it with the E. We try to get them to change it so that we make it different. There's a majority of thinkers that think outside, that are outside the mainstream, really subscribe to it. And finally, I should have put that at the end, even though it's right. I always point wrong. Right there. I can't point over it. But that one there, the second to the last one, is, to me, it's very important. It is strictly a solution for light. That's why people came up with it. Okay, well, I hope that's been informative to you. I know I've promised for a long time. If you ask me, are ether models correct? I don't know. We have, if the particle, I'll tell you this, before my dad solved gave a solution for waves in a particle model or a graviton model, I really never subscribed. People ask me if I was ethers. I said, well, there's got to be something. That's what I always said. There's got to be something. But I've always sort of backed off from. There's things in it that I personally, can it be right? Absolutely. Can one of these models be right? Absolutely. Can one of these people 400 years from now be the genius of the, or the genius, but the model that people are using successfully? Absolutely. I don't know. I personally have my own feeling about it, so, but don't take my word for it. You remember what I always say, stay critical, stay thinking. I'm Dave D. Hilser. I am your science therapist trying to get you to the promised land of becoming science woke. Ciao for now.